What's up, Longhorn Nation? So it is week 3 of the college football season. Texas coming off a tough home loss to the number one team in the country, the Alabama Crimson Tide. I guess they're the number 2 team in the country now. But regardless, a game that I think Texas played better in than most people expected. Not to claim any moral victories for you Aggies and Sooners out there. We're not doing that, but really proud of the way Texas played. But we do not hang on that loss for long. It is time to move on to UTSA Week 3. It's a good football team coming into town. They're replacing a lot of production from last year, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Some offensive line struggles, having to replace one of the best running backs in the country last year in Sincere McCormick. It's a big task. So today we're talking with Adrian Bermudez. He is a co-host on the Alamodome Audible podcast. They cover UTSA football. Really good stuff from them. I've checked out a little bit of their podcast so far. Really awesome stuff. Give him a follow on Twitter. I'll tag them below. We talk about where you can find their podcast, where you can find them on Twitter. Really good stuff from Adrian today. This has been my favorite interview so far this year, so I hope y'all enjoy it as much as I did. We also talk with Adrian about what he expects the final score for this week to be. Let me hear your final score predictions in the comments below. I expect a big win this week with whoever the hell is playing quarterback, and excited for week 3. Hook 'em. I'm here with Adrian Bermudez. He's the co-host of the Alamo Audible podcast. How's it going tonight, man?
Hey, what's going on, bud? It's going well. It's going
Good.
well. Excellent. I'm really excited for Saturday, my first trip to DKR. So
That's
the
awesome.
pilgrimage, right? The pilgrimage being
it,
a
it's a short but long trip up 35. It's not too far, but it takes forever to get there.
right,
Um,
naturally.
it did you already get tickets?
Yeah, I've had my tickets for a little while.
Okay,
So I have UTSA season tickets. They did a little pre-sale thing. I don't know
nice.
how good the seats are. I looked at the section. It looks like it's pretty upper, but
Yeah,
then people tell me there's not a bad section in the house. But I'm not gonna lie, I've gone on the Ticketmaster StubHub like shopping around. Should I
right.
upgrade? I don't
Yeah,
know. Yeah.
yeah. I wouldn't say there's necessarily a bad seat. There's obviously worse seats throughout the stadium, but you get to see everything from pretty much anywhere you sit. I think if you're sitting with like the rest of the visitors section where they have it now, I sat in pretty much those seats last year for a game, and I actually kind of liked it because it's in the end zone and you're way up, so you get to see everything kind of like you
Right.
would if you're watching film,
Right.
which I really enjoy. So I thought it was cool.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
okay, let's get to UTSA. So obviously the biggest question coming into this year was replacing Sincere McCormick. How has that been going? Obviously the two big names are, and I hope I'm pronouncing these names right, Traylon Smith and Brendan Brady. What has the production from those two been like this year?
Yeah, you're right. Traylon Smith and Brendan Brady are the ones that have sort of carried that torch, running back by committee, by partnership, taking over after Sincere McCormick has left. And we've had these enormous struggles at offensive line this year, which I'm sure you plan on asking me about. And that's had its issues. That's had its issues on the run game. It's probably affected the run game a lot more than the passing game. But also, I think UTSA offensively with Will Stein and Matt Maddox, they kind of anticipated this having to be a little bit more reliant on the passing game this season as far as production goes. And so we've already seen this season Frank Harris throw the ball more than he's ever thrown before. He threw the ball 45 times against Army, 43 times against Houston.
Yeah.
And for reference, he didn't throw the ball more than 40 times at all in 2021.
Wow.
The most throws he had was 39. That was once, and again, that was against Middle Tennessee, where you can get
Yeah.
away with something like that.
Right.
So just by nature of necessity, we've thrown the ball a heck of a lot more,
Hmm.
and to that point, Frank Harris has also been the best runner on the team so
Right.
far, right? He's the one that's started out the 38-yard run against Houston
Hmm.
and the 23-yard run against Army. Those have been the two largest and most explosive running plays that we've had. As far as Traylon Smith and Brendan Brady, it's interesting. So Traylon Smith got more carries in the Houston game. He's really versatile as a runner. He's also definitely a big man runner. You can tell he comes from that Power Five cloth. I mean, he had some guys bouncing off of him against the Army, but he had less carries in the Army game. I think he got maybe a little bit more banged up towards the end of that game, maybe around third, fourth quarter. But he only had like 8 carries. I'd like to see them have more of an even distribution and probably Traylon Smith getting more than the carries. But Brendan Brady, he hasn't busted a 15-yard run yet.
Yeah.
Traylon Smith is the only one that's had a 20-yard run. So, yeah, man, the run game is struggling, and we have not been able to replace Sincere McCormick's production in that regard. But it's partly his absence. It's a lot to do with the offensive line, though, man.
Right. And I guess having a guy like Frank Harris back there, at least able to contribute a little bit through the ground, helps. And that was actually one of the questions I wanted to ask you tonight was about him. Obviously, he's got dual threat capabilities, but the question I had was, is he a true dual threat quarterback? And it sure sounds like he is, but he's starting to, whether by necessity or just, finally getting more comfortable with it, starting to use his arm a lot more. And you said he's throwing the ball a lot. Has he been effective throwing the ball?
He has, and he always has been effective, in my opinion. Look, a lot of people think Sincere McCormick last year was really the leader of this offense, but to me, it was always Frank Harris. Frank Harris was really the captain of this team last season and this season. Sincere, sure, you could argue that 2020 season, but Frank Harris is really the man that this offense goes through. He's the leader of it, and with his arm, he's always had that talent. He's gotten so much better as the years have gone by. He was never a bad passer in any regard, but there's always been room for him to improve and get sharper,
Sure.
which he's really, really done. And there are some throws against that Houston game were just unreal, threading the needle through 3 or 4 different cornerbacks' hands, swiping at the ball. I mean, just phenomenal throwing, and he's got some deep ball capability as well. He's a lefty. He tends to throw that way a little bit, and they do throw a lot of short passes as well. But Frank Harris knows what he can do well, and he can throw the ball extremely well. It also helps when you have the trio of receivers that he does. I shouldn't even say trio; it's more like 4 or 5. But when you look at Joshua Cephas, Zachary Franklin, DeCorian JT Clark, you look at Oscar Cardenas, our tight end with the hands too. All those guys can go up there and get the ball. So Frank Harris is afforded excellent luxury in that he can put the ball around them. They're able to come down with it. But don't get me wrong, he can drop it in the basket and he can thread the needle as well, man. And he's fantastic doing all those things. He's thrown for over 300 yards in each of the last 2 games. And he's had a hat trick with 3 passing touchdowns in each of the last 2 games as well.
Yeah.
And we're not even talking about what he's done with his feet yet.
Right. So, and truly, I think UTSA, at least as far as numbers go, may have more weapons than even like Alabama last week, because they've got a couple guys, but I think if you just look at how UTSA spreads the ball around to these different guys, I think it's going to be a little bit different approach for Texas on the defensive side, having to cover so many different guys. And we talked a little bit about the running back struggling to run the ball. Are they a threat in the passing game at all?
Running backs, sure. I mean, they'll come out of the backfield, but really what you're going to see them is protecting the pocket more so, because our offensive line is so thin at that tackle position. You really got Brendan Brady and Traylon Smith just sort of stepping up as Frank Harris's bodyguard, right? They're just standing back there in the pocket with him, and you'll see us line up 5 wide. You'll see it a lot, but typically one guy's hanging back or dropping back to just provide a little bit of extra coverage, a little bit of help to Frank. But you're absolutely right when you talk about spreading the ball around the field. I mean, look, that trio of wide receivers each has over 150 yards on the season so far.
Yeah.
And they've all got well over 10 receptions. And he could really throw it to any of them on a dime. But now, as far as the running backs go, you might see a couple of screens out the backfield, but no, they're really more for blocking capabilities.
Okay. And I guess that kind of answers my next question. And really, I guess the final question I had about the offensive side was, this Texas rush defense has gotten night and day better, and Texas fans know this. I mean, from how they were last year to how they are this year, and we saw it against Alabama, really. I mean, so much better than they were last year. And so, I saw today that I think it was your top 4 offensive tackles are hurt or, missing this game in some capacity. So my question was, how do they slow down the rush? And I guess the running backs are going to be probably a pretty, important part of that.
I mean, they're going to try as best they can, but in a lot of those situations, it's still going to be a mismatch. It's really up for Frank Harris to get the ball out early, get the ball out quick. And he does have a tendency to get a little bit flustered whenever he's underneath that sort of pressure.
Mhm.
And yeah, man, it's menacing. It's scary as hell what you guys did against Alabama. That pass rush is something really serious. And we saw a really, really nasty one against Houston, and we held our own against it extremely well. They still got to Frank Harris, I think, for 3 sacks, and Army got to him for 4, for crying out loud.
Mhm.
But but they didn't. Houston didn't even get to him, I think, until well into the second half. And so it's really up to Frank Harris to be smart with the ball, to be able to scramble whenever he sees it available, to throw it away, which he has got to do a little bit better of a job of throwing it away, and to get rid of it, right, in
Yeah.
general. And even whenever he does scramble, man, he has a bad tendency of getting tackled. He's
Mhm.
not a guy to slide at all, and so there's
Takes
a
his big
big
hits.
dude, yeah, man. And so like you're clenching your teeth every time you see him take off with it. And he tries to get around 1, 2, 3, and then he tries to duck his shoulder on the last one. It's like, oh my goodness. And he's had a couple of injuries before, right, in his
Yeah,
past. So
yeah.
yeah, it's something we're dealing with though, man. But no, I mean, um we had Mekhi Hart go out, our starting right tackle, in the first quarter against Houston, and we were already kind of thin at that position, but it bit us in the butt really, really early.
Mhm.
And it's been a replacement by a committee of underclassmen and walk-ons. We've got a sophomore walk-on, Frankie Martinez, taking majority of those snaps.
Yeah.
And it's been rough. And then our other tackle, our left tackle, Spencer Burford, he's suiting up for the 49ers.
Mhm.
And so behind him, we've been trying to rotate guys as well, but it's really, really been thin. We've got one guy coming back, Demetrius Allen. He had some off the field issues, but he should be another critical depth piece. He's a junior at the position, so we might have a little bit more there than we had the last 2 weeks at offensive line, but it's still so thin, bud. I mean,
Yeah.
it's tough. Yeah, I mean, we've got guards playing tackle,
Right.
and guys
That's
that just, quite frankly, you look at a Tatafu, he's just not quick enough and physical enough to keep up with a lot of these pass rushing linebackers,
yeah.
especially the caliber that Texas has. So no, man, you guys are gonna have y'all's fun with that. It's really gonna be up to Frank Harris to be smart with the football and
Mhm.
just try to weather that as best as he can. And again, Will Stein, UTSA's offensive schemes, they've drawn up to be able to afford him to do some of this, have a little more flexibility. And the RPO game's been crazy from UTSA.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're going to see a lot of that.
Well, good news, bad news on that front. The good news is Texas traditionally, at least in the last 10 to 15 years, has been awful against dual threat quarterbacks.
Yeah.
That goes all the way from God, I forget his name. He played quarterback at BYU and plays for the Saints now. Oh, Taysom Hill. Taysom
Oh
Hill
yeah.
used to
Hmm.
carve us up. And then last week we saw it with Bryce Young escaping the rush and picking up 16 to get that game-winning field goal. The bad news is you said he's not real smart about getting down and sliding. Our DBs like to take hits, man. They like to take shots.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
that that does, I guess, for y'all's sake, concern me a little bit. If he's not used to getting down and sliding down the
Yeah.
field,
No,
he might take a lick or
absolutely.
two.
Dude, absolutely. Yeah. And he's taken 7 sacks already. And you just the 3 game stretch that we've had, tougher than any 3 games we had last year. Probably the toughest 3 game scheduling UTSA has maybe ever had,
Yeah,
right? In their 11, 12 year history.
right.
And so you open up with Houston, you go on the longest road trip you can to West Point and play Army. And now the last game is the hardest one, right? And the biggest stage. You got to go to DKR and play the largest dudes you've probably played. And definitely the biggest hitters you're gonna have to go up against. And so
Yeah.
Frank's really got to be smart, man. It's something that I try not to talk about, speak too much taboo, give it oho, as we say in San Antonio. But dude, I don't know, man. It's something that really, really worries me, him not being able to get down
Yeah.
and taking a nasty lick.
Yeah. Something to keep an eye on. Okay, so this is the controversy of the day. This video is coming out tomorrow, so this is for tomorrow's purpose. This is yesterday, but for me right now, for us right now, this is today. What's up with the hype video on UT's campus?
You gotta love it, right? You gotta love it. Hey, triangle of toughness travels,
There we
man,
go.
and we got to show out. So look, I think it was really, really cool. And so UTSA has done this before.
Mhm.
They've done the hype video around the campus just to more so showcase where we're going to. They don't do it just around campus, but they'll do it around the town or the city scenes,
Right.
and try to showcase the new uniform. So it's not something that was specifically done to Texas. Though I
Yeah.
do think there are a few more campus shots than there were in others, and they were a little more. I don't want to say egregious, but they're flexing on them for sure.
Yeah.
And I also think that there's something that a lot of people are missing when it comes to the outrage. But look, UTSA is a UT system school. We are part of the UT
Right.
system and the UT branch of campuses and institutions. And so I do think part of that was like, hey, we're at Big Brother's campus, right? UTSA is at UT. And so
Uh-huh.
I think there was sort of this kind of celebratory thing of UT system, and they're going to
Sure.
be on the field together. And so I think some of that was also kind of a nod and ode to just
Yeah.
the greater branch of the UT umbrella. And but I think that's so far over anyone's head.
No, it definitely is, and I think a lot of Texas fans took it the wrong way. But I thought it was really freaking cool. Like they went to some of the more iconic spots on campus, and maybe
Hmm.
some people thought it was like kind of a stepping on the logo at at the 50-yard line or
Sure.
whatever.
Yeah.
But I thought it was pretty badass, and I think UTSA has some of the coolest uniforms out there. So I
Nice.
really enjoyed it. I didn't take as much offense as some other people did, but I think some of our fans are trying to use it as like bulletin board material for themselves. Like they need the hype.
Well, dude, I gotta say, I think that this week did need some talking points, a little
Yeah,
bit of drama for social media to get amped about. It had been a little bit too quiet, a little too respectful
sure.
Monday through Wednesday. I think both coaches and both players were commending each team
Mhm.
really respectfully, right? I think one of y'all's defensive players called UTSA the best team in the state last season, like, something crazy. I was like, all right, this is just too much. This is way too much
Everybody's being
respect.
too damn nice. Somebody
Yeah,
say
come
something
on.
mean.
Let's get some beef going
Yeah.
here. So yeah, I'm glad we got a little bit of it.
Well,
It'll make Saturday more fun.
that's the problem when one head coach is a Nick Saban disciple, and then the other guy is like born and bred East Texas high school football coach. Like Jeff
Right.
Traylor's not gonna go out there and just talk shit about anybody, and then like Sark is like, okay, if he ever said anything like that under Saban, he would have got his ass ripped. So he knows better.
Right.
Um,
Right. Good old boys.
yeah, yeah. So back to the football side of things. On defense, so lost a few pieces last year.
Hmm.
Who are some guys that are stepping up this year? And I know the defense probably um, hasn't met a standard, I guess, this year. I gave up what 38 to Army, and then
Yeah.
37 to Houston. I know that was double overtime, but maybe not the best defensive performance this year. But who are some guys that have stepped up to lead the defense?
Yeah, no, certainly so. Certainly so. The defense has kind of been a tale of two games so far when we look at how they performed against Houston, how they performed against Army. And I think a big part of that is just schematically how you've got to prepare for a team like Army
Right,
versus everybody else.
right.
So names, right, that sort of fly off the page, people that are kind of making an impression this season. Nick Troy Fortune, he's a senior cornerback, transfer guy, and he is an absolute beast just as far as tackling goes. Tackling hasn't always been this defense's strong suit, just form tackling. We like to try to hit hard or maybe do some arm tackles, but really getting low and wrapping up is something that we've had to improve on over the years, and we have improved on it. Nick Troy Fortune has done a fantastic job over the last two games of really not letting any ball carriers by him. And he's really kind of stuck on guys wide on rice. And so he's been fantastic. At linebacker, you've got Adrian Taylor, who's a senior, and he's been around. He's already been a big impact guy on this team. But now his little brother is kind of rising up through the ranks as well. Danye Taylor, he also plays Sam linebacker, same position, and sometimes they're on the field at the same time.
That's
But
cool.
but Danye Taylor is actually a little more physical, and just got a little bit higher motor than Adrian, who's already a high level player. And so those two together, they're absolute monsters. You love seeing them on the field together. They're really able to bring the house sometimes. Who else there's really been shouting? Our defensive ends are still strong. You look at Brandon Madison and Cyrus Simon, even a guy like Trumaine Bell, Joe Evans. Those guys, they have seniority and they're able to get into the backfield on a really consistent basis. UTSA has always been able to lean on their pass rush, and same thing that's sort of happening on our running back side. It might not be that one single guy who blows it up all the time, but we still have a committee of guys that are really, really good at doing it. And then on at the nose tackle, I'd really tell someone who's my favorite, who I tell people to watch out for is Lamont McDougal. He's a senior and he's only 5'10", but he's absolutely massive and he's a beast. He plays with the physicality that is just strong, man, and he can get by the best of them. He's a guy that can definitely run with the best horses of UT's offensive line, no doubt.
All right. So I guess the big question for every interview I've done so far this year, whether it was Louisiana Monroe or Alabama, the big question is always who stops Bijan Robinson. Everybody knows about him. Everybody game plans to stop him, but not everybody can. And Alabama slowed him down running the ball, but they weren't able to slow him down in the passing game. He's really good at kind of just leaking out there on a wheel route or whatever, and making his presence known through the air. So who on this defense has that ability?
I'm really, really glad that you bring up his ability in the passing game as well, because I think that's where UTSA's really got to be scared. So, I mean, the tackle, you heard me talking about our tackling ability just a second ago. The strength of Bijan is so intimidating. I'm not sure if we have a true guy that could just one-on-one bring down someone with Bijan's strength. Coach Jeff Traylor actually talked about his lower body strength in the same breath as Earl Campbell and Eric Dickerson.
Oh, wow.
When he was talking about Bijan. So yeah, so high respect for him there. But
Yeah.
What we saw happen against the Army game with UTSA is that we overcommitted to our linebackers playing and covering the triple option and the run game and the ground game, and which we were able to do well in slowing down what the Army does best, but it completely gashed us in the passing game. Army does not do well passing the football at all. They completed 13 passes for 304 yards against UTSA, which is practically unheard of. I think it was the most passing yards they had in the better part of 10 years, or second most, something like that. And so it was just ridiculous. But I think our linebackers and secondary got torched just schematically. And really our linebackers were letting guys get by them by overcommitting to that run to stopping the triple option, right? And so that's what's scary, because Bijan is able to be one of those guys to drop out and then catch one of those short passes and take off on you. And so who can't stop him? I look at the linebacker duo I was telling you about earlier, Adrian Taylor, Donye Taylor. I look at a defensive end like a Brandon Matterson. And I look like and cornerback Nate Troy Fortune is probably going to be rare times where he's going to have to rise up, but there's going to be the occasion where he will catch him on the edge, and he's done a good job of containing UTSA's edge. So as far as the best tacklers, best hitters on the team, those would probably be the guys I'd say that have the best chance,
Right.
let's say, against Bijan. Yeah.
Okay.
But also, man, let's not, it almost escaped me. Army fullback Jacoby Buchanan was stopped for his first negative yardage, his first loss ever in his career. The guy had never had a run for a negative gain. It was always no gain or positive. That's a streak of 286 carries.
Wow.
UTSA gave him his first loss of his career.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I mean, definitely our run game, we've got a run defense, no doubt.
Yeah. Okay. And then obviously we just talked about Bijan, his ability to impact the passing game, but Texas is also loaded at receiver with Xavier Worthy, all the guys out there. What is the secondary situation looking like with the Roadrunners? How do they slow down the Texas pass offense?
There were a lot of question marks around the guys on the secondary going into the season, but I think a lot of those went away whenever we saw how they played against Houston. There's the Tank Dell Clayton Tune connection, which is really, really scary going into that game, but they more or less really eliminated, nullified what Clayton Tune was able to do with his arm, and he had to even go into a bit of a dual threat sort of situation in order to get Houston to come back in that game and win it. So our secondary has done a great job, I think, against the pass. The Army game, again, schematic fluke. I really do believe that. I think we're closer to the team that we were against Houston than we were against Army when we're talking about UTSA secondary. You've got a lot of good seniority on there, a lot of guys returning, and a lot of guys that have improved just over the years. Safety Rashad Wisdom, Kelechi Nwachukwu, a Clifford Chapman, a Corey Mayfield at cornerback. You hear me talk about Nick Troy Fortune a lot. All those guys are extremely reliable when it comes to taking care of that open field, right? And in the back. And I think especially with UT's question marks at quarterback going into this game, I don't think UTSA is going to have to worry about covering the deep pass very much, if at all, in this game. What they're really going to have to be worried about is those short passes.
Mhm.
Bijan Robinson getting open in the pass game. Rashawn Johnson running wildcat
Yeah.
formations on us. That might get wacky, right? But I think it's really the up front and that front seven where you're going to see the biggest challenge presented to UTSA. I think the secondary, we're going to be just all right.
Yeah. And I'm not gonna ask you about like break down our quarterback situation because that's a whole different video in itself. But it will be interesting to see how Texas approaches that with the potential third string quarterback out there. I will say he's got a decent arm for what you'd expect for a third string quarterback, and I feel like he would make a lot of sense on a team like UTSA, or maybe even like a team in the American Conference. I think he would succeed there. But I mean, hell, it's going to be interesting for Texas fans even to see how he plays. Assuming he does, Sark isn't willing to give anybody any hints on who is going to play quarterback. Okay, so I always try to get one of these from everybody that I talk to. Give me a final score prediction. I saw some controversial ones from the official UTSA account on Twitter. Give me yours.
Yeah, and so on our Alamodome Audible podcast, I think it already gave it, and so I'm trying to remember exactly what I gave. I want to say my final was 32-24 Texas,
Okay.
or UT Austin, I should say. But yeah, I think I had 24-30. Look, man, this offense still has got a hell of a lot of scoring firepower, right? So talking about UTSA.
Mhm.
And so they're going to put up points. Frank Harris is going to have his moments where he really shines out there. And I think makes a lot of UT fans kind of raise their eyebrows and maybe give a little more respect towards UTSA. And yeah, we're going to have our moments. But look, maybe it could keep it close for a half, a little bit in the third quarter. But ultimately, I think the size difference in the horses is really going to get away from the road runners, and UT will be able to handle this in the fourth quarter by the
Okay.
time that gets here. Yeah, we'll be gassed.
I respect it. All right.
Mhm.
Tell people where they can find y'all's podcast at.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So everything is on our website, alamodomeaudible.com. If you're on Twitter, we're at Alamo Audible on Twitter. You can find us there. My Twitter is at Alamo Adrian _. And so, yeah, please, for all of your UTSA news, I know we do have a lot of UT fans that might have that UTSA shirt in the closet from their cap days. Maybe they grew up in the San Antonio area, or maybe they just sort of grown an affinity for UTSA being down the street, and they've kind of just enjoyed watching them play. So it's okay for UTSA to be your second favorite team
There you
every other week. And if you need any UTSA content, man, we cover all the sports, but we really cover football deep. So yeah, check us out, man. Subscribe for all your UTSA content, and if you're ever in San Antonio, come find us.
Awesome, man. All right. Well, I appreciate the time. Speaking of UTSA #2 fans, that's me right here, being from the San Antonio area. Got to
Yes.
represent the 210. So I'll be checking out y'all's podcast for sure, man. I look forward to it. Good luck this weekend.
Tyler, I appreciate it so much, man. Thank you.
All
Thank you.
right.
Good
No
luck to you
problem.
guys as well.